Okay, stirrings of rebellion. This is a lot of the seeds that end up leading to the Revolutionary War. So, first thing that you really need to know about is the French and Indian War. It's an old rivalry between France and England. Starts off in 1754. Conflict picks up as the French begin building forts near the Virginia border. The French and Indians, or the French and the Native Americans, ally together and won many of the early battles. There's the Albany Plan of Union. The colonies debate forming a central government because of possible defeat in the war. The idea was proposed by Benjamin Franklin, but was never adopted because the British end up stepping in and turning the war around. So there's a victory at Quebec, and it's the turning point. There is a treaty in 1763 called the Treaty of Paris. And during that treaty, the French lost all lands in America. Okay. This is a drawing from Ben Franklin's paper. It's kind of like a political cartoon, and it shows how the snake is separate. And basically, you need to join or you're going to get defeated. Okay. Post-war problems. Proclamation of 1763 basically declares that nobody is allowed to go west of the Appalachian Mountains. So if you see right here, the Appalachian Mountains run from up here in Canada all the way down to here in Georgia. So that becomes the natural boundary because people can clearly see where the mountains are. And the British government says, do not cross here. Colonists ignore it and basically provoke the Native Americans because the Native Americans now have this territory. So basically the colonists are invading their territory and they don't like it, so then they retaliate. The British Army stays in the colonies, which makes some colonists upset. The British are heavily in debt because of the French and Indian War. So when you're in debt, you have to make more money. And the way a government makes more money is they tax. So they increase their taxes, also called duties, and they're established on certain goods to help pay for British expenses. Smugglers try to avoid paying taxes by smuggling goods and basically selling them on a black market. There are writs of assistance, basically search warrants, that are issued by the British authorities to catch smugglers. So no different today than somebody who is smuggling drugs. There are legal ways to get drugs, like through a doctor because you need them. And then there are people who smuggle them, kind of the same deal. Okay, police get a search warrant and they catch somebody smuggling drugs. They're in trouble. They go to jail. Same thing back then. British taxation. You have the Sugar Act. It affected merchants and traders. This is where the protests begin. If you take and tax people's sugar and people have to have less sugar, I can understand why they were protesting. James Otis comes up with this phrase, no taxation without representation. Basically meaning you can't tax us if you don't listen to us or give us a voice in Parliament. Because at that time, none of the colonies had colonists representing them in Parliament. Parliament only represented people in Britain. So then you have the Stamp Act, the new tax placed on imports such as tea, glass, paper, and paint. And if you think about these things, they are pretty important to colonial life. You need glass, you need paper to write, and you need paint in order to make your wood and things last longer, because it serves as a protective barrier from the elements. The colonists again reacted with protest. The British reacted by sending more troops into the colonies. So this is where the resistance begins. A group forms calling themselves the Sons of Liberty. In Boston, the two main people are Samuel Adams and John Adams. They kind of go under the credo of no taxation without representation. The protests and boycotts were organized. The stamp agents were harassed, and the laws eventually repealed. Okay. Afterwards, Parliament comes up with the Declaratory Act, and it states that Parliament has the right to declare laws for British colonies, which again still does not solve the problem of no taxation without representation. After they have the Declaratory Act, they come up with the Townsend Act. The Townsend Act puts a new tax placed on imports such as tea, glass, paper, and paint. Basically, it is the Stamp Act, but in a new package. Okay, same thing. The colonists again reacted with protest. The British reacted by sending even more troops. So this leads to the Boston Massacre. So in March of 1770, protest by colonists kind of gets out of hand. British troops fire on the crowd. 5 colonists are killed. The first of which to die is Crispus Attucks, and he was a black man, and he was the first person to give his life for liberty in America. Most soldiers were found not guilty at their trial for murder. The British ruled that they acted in self-defense. John Adams was appointed as the attorney for the soldiers. Very similar to the way, it doesn't mean that John Adams agreed with the soldiers, but very similar to the way today, if you go to trial, a lot of times if somebody cannot afford an attorney, then somebody gets appointed to be their attorney. The British appointed John Adams to be the attorney for the British soldiers.